I think it's clear which one of us, Stephen, is a liar. I think it's clear which one of us is desperate, which one of us is scrabbling around trying to save face, in the face of having been basically severely dealt with by yours truly, a very superior, very well-educated field marshal, much better than you in every way, Stephen. You're a failure. You're an abject failure. You're a destitute failure. And your clout chasing won't win you any points. My people are laughing at you. They are laughing heartily. Ha ha ha! Chee, what a fool this little boy is and how unimpressive he is.
Allow myself to introduce myself.
Well, everyone's favorite fake professor, Bart Kay, is at it again. Last week, after I exposed some of his lies, he ended up filming a rebuttal video, and it was about 44 minutes long. 37 of those minutes he spent attacking my terrible physique, my Weetabix certificates, and my low YouTube view count, and he spent about 7 minutes attempting to rebut my video, and he failed miserably. But let's take a look at what exactly he had to say.
And in that 2 weeks, my weight went down by 4 pounds.
Fat.
So with regard to the 4 pounds that he ended up telling Steak and Butter Gal that he ended up losing, he did clarify that it wasn't total weight, it was fat weight. So I did adjust it. You can see that I crossed it out, and everything that is in pink are the adjustments that I've made to the previous lies that he spewed last week. But let's go ahead and see what else he had to say.
Plus or minus whatever the error of measurement is of your average biometric impedance scale, which I've looked up and I do understand what the error around the measurement is. I'm perfectly happy to say that the error was probably fairly insignificant around that particular aspect of the weight loss, which was the fat portion of the total fat loss during that, the total weight lost during that 2-week period.
Whoa, let's hold on a second. That margin of error is insignificant? Well, let's take a look. He told Steak and Butter Gal that he lost 4 pounds of fat. He told Mark Bell 2.5 pounds of fat, and he told me 5.5. So if we take the mean value of 4 pounds of fat loss, then 5.5 and 2.5, that is 38% away from the mean. Does that sound like an insignificant margin of error?
Yes, the context of this discussion with Bella was fat specifically. My total weight on a scale, total mass lost, body mass lost in that 14 days, depending on my water balance on any given day for the 14 days following, was that anywhere between an additional 15 to 20 pounds, give or take, in water was also lost during that period.
So let's hold on a second. He said that he lost between 15 to 20 pounds of water. So if I'm getting this right, 15 plus 4 is 19 and 20 plus 4 is 24. So in 2 weeks, you stuffed your face with 5 to 6 times your maintenance calories and you end up losing between 19 to 24 pounds. That makes absolutely no sense. And also, the 24 pounds, that is now even more than the 22 pounds that you told me. And if we were to take a look at the actual numbers from last week, you told Mark Bell that you ended up losing 15 pounds, you told me 22, so the mean between those values is 18.5. So if we were to take a look at plus or minus 5%, that means that you should have lost anywhere between 17.6 to 19.5. So the 22 pounds and 15 is way outside of where it should be, and the 24 that you told Steak and Butter Gal is even more inaccurate. Because on the high end, the 24 pounds that you told Steak and Butter Gal, that is going to be 30% above the mean of 18.5 pounds lost. And with regard to your self-experiment, the way a self-experiment works, if you were to perform a 2-week self-experiment, is you have your starting weight and then you have your ending weight. And then if you wanted to add some numbers, you could say how much of that was water loss, how much was fat loss. And with regard to the fat loss, you can have an estimate of the fat loss because you're not going to go 100%. However, the actual total weight that you lose at the end of the 2 weeks, there is no estimating. The number is the number. If you lost 22 pounds, it's 22 pounds. You can't say, well, it was between 15 pounds and 24 pounds because over the course of the 2 weeks, my water fluctuated. No, you start at one weight, you end at one weight. Whatever the end weight is, that's how much weight you lost. But let's hear what else you have to say.
Okay, so calories in, calories out, busted.
Right, there you go. So eating 6.5 thousand calories, that is the 95% that's the 100% range of different values, I think it was, from memory, around the so-called caloric intakes for those 14 days, which is in comparison to my usual 1800 so-called calories. That is a fairly significant, fairly vast increase in caloric intake for that period of 14 days, during which time, if calories in, calories out was correct, you could expect that I would have gained significant fat. I did not. I lost an amount of fat, roughly 4 pounds. Calories in, calories out busted.
No, your N of 1 2-week experiment does not disprove CICO, because I could easily use my N of 1 to discredit your CICO experiment, because in 2020, for 1 month, 28 days, I ended up increasing my calories. I went from consuming 1,600 calories on average every single day to consuming roughly 4,300 calories. So with regard to the weight that I could have expected to gain, I could have expected to gain about 24 pounds of fat over the course of those 28 days. I didn't gain 24 pounds, however, I did gain 22 pounds of fat over the course of those 28 days, and I mentioned this in about 3 or 4 different videos, and every single one of those videos, the numbers remain exactly the same. I never stray from it, unlike you, where you have 10 different conversations and you give away 10 different numbers. So if your N of 1 experiment disproves CICO, then my N of 1 experiment proves CICO. But let's hear what else you had to say. When he spoke to me on July 4th of 2020.
Different context, different discussion, different goals in mind. We were having a debate-style discussion about mainly exercise programming, but also calories in, calories out was mentioned during that discussion, which is universally described as being a predictable way of gauging what's going to happen to your weight, your total body weight. And so the context of the discussion with you, Stephen, was total body weight.
Again, total pounds of body weight is a fixed number. It's not like fat where you could say, I estimate that I lost X amount of fat. The number on the scale is the number on the scale. If you weighed 150 pounds at the start of the experiment and then you drop down to 135 pounds, that is 15 pounds. It's not, well, it could be anywhere from 15 to 22 pounds. It doesn't work that way. Whatever the number on the scale is, that is the number. But let's go ahead and hear what else you have to say. I guess the 4 pounds wasn't quite impressive enough, because he told
No, the 4 pounds was fat. Specifically, the total value I gave you included the water mass lost as well, Stephen.
Told me that he lost 22 pounds.
Correct.
I don't want to keep beating a dead horse, but again, he told Steak and Butter Gal that he lost 4 pounds of fat. He told me he lost 5.5 pounds of fat. And he told Mark Bell that he lost 2.5 pounds of fat. So if we take the mean of 4 pounds of fat loss, then between the 5.5 and 2.5, that is 38% away from the mean. Does that sound like an acceptable margin of error? I think not, but let's hear what else Bart has to say.
You need to also understand, Stephen, that anytime you measure anything physiological on a human being, there is a variability of measurement, day to day, whatever. There is a 95% confidence interval around the number you get. So I have leeway, quite a bit of leeway, to accurately and correctly report slightly different numbers from time to time based on what my goal is. When I'm talking to you about how much weight I lost in total on a scale, around 22 pounds, I'm using a number closer to the upper end of that 95% confidence interval. It is still correct scientifically. It is still truthful. It is still a gauge on what occurred to make the strongest possible point in a debate-style discussion about the concept. And the concept at the stage of this discussion with you was about weight on a scale.
So to his earlier points, once again, you can have a little bit of leeway with regard to the fat loss, but you can have leeway with the total loss. And with regard to the fat loss, if he was just bolstering his numbers to get the best possible argument, because for me, he was having a debate and he wanted to strengthen his argument, why did he tell me 22 pounds? Why didn't he tell me 24? Because apparently Steak and Butter Gal, he told 24. But anyway, that is beside the point.
So I'm going to use the upper bound. I lost, up to 22 pounds, 10 kilos or so. on the basis that that is the upper range of the error around that measurement.
And here is where Bart really starts to lose it and starts grasping at straws, because for somebody who claims to be a professor and an expert researcher, the best there ever is apparently, he doesn't really know what a confidence interval is. Because the thing that he says, he keeps saying that the numbers on his experiment were within 95% confidence, but that is not what a confidence interval is. Now, if you were to take a look behind me, out of all of those Weetabix certificates, a couple of them are actually diplomas, and for one of those diplomas, I did need to take a research course in college in order to graduate, so I do have a little bit of a functional knowledge of how to interpret research papers. Granted, it is not my area of expertise, and there are people who are far better than I am when it comes to analyzing research papers, but I do have a general sense of how to interpret one. With regard to an actual confidence interval, it doesn't mean that if I were to lose 5 pounds, I could go around and tell people within 95% of that number. No, the 5 pounds is the 5 pounds. What a confidence interval is, it is reproducibility. So if you were to perform the same experiment over a long enough period of time, a 95% confidence interval means that you would get the same result 95% of the time. And the way that you determine a confidence interval is, the first thing, you need to have a set of data points. Not just one data point, but you need a set. Once you have your set of data points, then you need to calculate the mean. That is going to be your average. Once you have the mean, then you need to figure out what the standard deviation is. And with regard to standard deviations, if you know anything about statistics or bell curves, you have different types of distributions. If you have a lot of people that are going to be sandwiched in the middle and most people are going to be in the average, you're going to have a very steep curve. Whereas if it's more spread out and you have a lot more people that are going to be toward the ends, so it's not everybody in the middle, you're going to have some people with bad results, some people with average results, and some people with good results, it's going to be more of a flat curve. If we were to take a normal distribution, that is your standard bell curve, and with regard to the distribution, within one standard deviation of the mean, if it is a normal distribution, you are going to have 34.1% in either direction, so 68.2% is going to fall within one standard deviation. Then you're going to have about 13.6% within another standard deviation, then another 2.2, then I believe it is going to be something like 1%, then it's just going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. So let's say Bart were to run this experiment with 100 people, and then the average was something like 18.5 pounds, with 15 and 22 being one standard deviation apart. If it was normally distributed, that would mean that roughly 68 people would fall between 15 pounds and 22 pounds of fat loss if they were to increase their calories by 5 to 6 times over a course of 2 weeks. Then you would have a small subset of the population, roughly 13.6% in one standard deviation in either direction from there, that would lose a little bit more and a little bit less than the 15 and the 22. But that is basically how you would calculate the actual curve itself. And then with regard to the confidence interval, if you were to keep reproducing this, let's say you ran this experiment 100 times, that means that 95% of the time, so 95 out of the 100, you would get those same results. So on average, 95% of the time, you would get 68% of the people that would have an average of 18.5 pounds lost, with on the lower end of that one standard deviation being 15 pounds and on the high end being 22. But let's hear what else Bart has to say.
Between January 1 this year and January 14 this year,
2022,
I increased my caloric intake from roughly 17 to 1800 per day, kcals, up to 8.5 to 8,750.
No, misspeak. Apologies for that. That's just an error. It's the sort of thing that can happen during a live presentation. The wrong numbers can sometimes come out of your mouth. What's important here is the concept. The actual figure was 6, 6.5, plus or minus 95%, around that. I really should have said 6 rather than 8 in front of that number. That said, it was a mistake, it was a misspeak, but that said, actually, the numbers I gave are still within the realms of possibility of 95% confidence around that.
With regard to misspeaking when he said the 85 to 8750, I ended up correcting that, and let's assume that he was correct and he actually did mean to say 6,000 to 6,500. Well, with regard to the confidence interval of being within 95%, let's take a look. I'm a little bit confused by the wording because I'm not sure if he means that he needs to be within 5% or if he is suggesting that he's allowed to be off by 95%. If he is suggesting that he's allowed plus or minus 5% from the mean, let's take a look at the numbers. With regard to the 8,500 to 6,000, he said that that is still within a 95% confidence. Well, the mean of 6,000 and 8,500 on the low end would be 7,250. So plus or minus 5% of that, you are looking at on the low end 6,888 to 7,613 calories. Whereas with regard to the actual numbers that he gave, they are really far off. They are nowhere near that 95% confidence interval. Then with regard to the high end, between 6,500 and 8,750, that is going to mean, it's going to have a mean of 7,625, which means plus or minus 5%, you are looking at 7,244 calories to on the high end, 8,006 calories. So with regard to the actual 95% confidence interval, if he is suggesting that he's allowed to be off by 95%, then on the low end, that means that he could consume as little as 300 calories to on the high end, 12,675 calories. So that is a gigantic leeway, but I don't think he meant that. I think he meant 5%. So if he really was off by plus or minus 5%, then that means that he is actually off by 17.25% on the low end, and on the high end, he is off by 14.75%. So 3 times more than the plus or minus 5%. But let's go ahead and hear what else he has to say.
The calories listed for various foods are allowed to be out by 20% either way.
Yes, you are allowed to be off by 20% when you are putting calories on labels. However, none of your numbers are within 20%. Let's just take a look. With regard to the actual total pounds of weight loss, you ended up giving anywhere from 15 when you spoke to Mark Bell, to 22 when you spoke to me, to 19 to 24. So plus or minus the numbers that you gave me and Mark Bell, that's going to be 19% from the mean of 18.5. And then if we were to take the low end of 15 and the high end of 24, then on the high end, you are off by 30%. Then let's go ahead and take a look at the water weight loss. Well, with regard to the numbers that you gave Steak and Butter Gal, 15 to 20, if we were to take a look at the mean of 14.5 and the plus or minus, then the numbers that you gave Steak and Butter Gal from the mean, that's going to be 38% off. So that is double the 20% that you suggested. And then if we were to take a look at the total fat loss, the mean is 4%, or is 4 pounds. You told Mark Bell 2.5, you told me 5.5, so you actually did get it right when you told Steak and Butter Gal 4. However, where you got it wrong is that 2.5 and 5.5 is 38% away from the mean. So let's hear what else you have to say.
So, if when I was saying 6 to 6,500, I was using the lower 95% bound, and if talking about 8,500 to 8,750, I'm talking about the upper 95% bound of that, then I'm still telling the truth within 95% confidence limits. Sorry about that. It was a mistake. I misspoke. Nonetheless, it's still actually correct, Stephen, and your point falls flat on its face.
Aside from Bart not really understanding exactly what a confidence interval is, the numbers that he's giving are nowhere near 95%, because if we were to take a look at the calories on the low end of 6,000, the high end of 8,750, that is nowhere near 95% confidence interval if it is what he suggests it means, which it isn't. But unless he is saying that he is allowed to be off by 95% in each direction, that is the only way it would make sense. So his argument is actually the argument that falls completely flat on his face. But let's go ahead and hear what else he has to say.
I think it's clear which one of us, Stephen, is a liar. I think it's clear which one of us is desperate, which one of us is scrabbling around trying to save face, in the face of having been basically severely dealt with by yours truly, a very superior, very well-educated field marshal, much better than you in every way, Stephen. You're a failure. You're an abject failure. You're a destitute failure. And your clout chasing won't win you any points. My people are laughing at you. They are laughing heartily. Ha ha ha! Chee hee! What a fool this little boy is, and how unimpressive he is.
Allow myself to introduce myself.
And that is another terrific argument from Bart Simpson. Well, Bart, do you have anything else to say? Next Sunday, I'm going to be sharing another one of his lies, so tune in next week.
We have to wait for a whole week? Is that how long it takes you to rifle through all my material to try and misrepresent what I've said by creatively editing it? Goodness me, I've seen your video here today, Stephen, about an hour ago, and I'm just about finishing off the recording. I'm now going to take another hour or so to edit it up and to make it, ready for presentation, and then I'm going to post it. And I'm much busier than you are, son. Much busier.
Yes, Bart, you do have to wait an entire week for me to film a video because I actually do have a full-time job. I own a health and performance center where I coach my athletes, and I also own a physiotherapy clinic where I treat my patients. So I don't have time to debunk all of your videos and go over all of your lies because it actually is quite time-consuming. Unlike yourself, where you may have unlimited time, I know you say you don't have much time, and I actually do believe you because you are a con man and you do sell shit supplements from Cerule, and I know how much time is involved with all of that bullshit marketing that you do for Cerule. So I'm sure that your time is filled up with trying to con people into buying your shit supplements, but I'm going to get into that next week, and yes, it is going to take me about a week because, again, you tell so many lies that it takes a lot of effort for me to go over and debunk every single one of your lies. But next week, I'm going to go over your bullshit MLM scam and tell people exactly why they shouldn't buy your shit supplements. So take care, Bart. I will speak to you next week. Thanks for hanging around until the end of the video. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like the video and comment down in the comment section, as it would really help out with the algorithm, and also share this video so we can help get this information out to as many people as possible. And also subscribe to the channel by clicking on the icon in the bottom right hand corner and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of the videos. For those of you interested in health optimization, you can check out the video in the top right corner where I discuss the 6 foundation principles. And for those of you interested in optimizing your performance, then consider becoming a member. It's only $5 per month and you get a ton of perks, including exclusive access to this program design lecture series playlist above my head.